Hey there, welcome back to Broken Arrow. In this preview version, I got access to the Special Forces. So let's see what that last specialization really has. And also, what it combines with. The tooltip says elite special forces, or rather elite soldiers, supported by stealth aviation to strike deep into enemy territory. I have had the pleasure to be on the receiving part of the special forces, and if you don't really have something that can hold the line, I've found that these guys aren't that great. They're very mobile, they're very quick, especially with their helicopters, they can deploy very quickly. But I think you need some staying power. Now, what do you combine it with? Option 1, USMC, so versatile, amphibious vehicles, you got some decent tanks in there, you got some decent helicopters you can pair these guys with. Option 2 is full armor. I think this could be a pretty good candidate, because with that, you got your staying power. Option 3, airborne. Very, very mobile group with that. Low staying power. You got 500 points in vehicles, and I think what you're going to get is the M8. That's going to be your primary tank. It's not a bad tank, it has a good gun, but its staying power is very limited. It's going to all come out of your infantry and your airstrikes, and if the enemy sets up in the air, well, you might not be able to fly in. So option 4, striker cavalry. Maybe you'll be able to definitely outmaneuver using your own helicopters and the striker's mobility. The thing is, I don't think that these guys still have a whole lot of firepower and staying power for that matter. So I'm going to go armored brigade. And of course, this is just my pick, and you can of course create your own. Now, what do we find when we're looking at the special forces? We have Green Beret Punishers. And these guys can be armed with the Punisher. That is their automatic grenade launcher. Nice range, and with it you can certainly decimate infantry very quickly. They also got a Scar for standoff engagements. They have the Mark 48 for some standoff engagements, and these are again 600 meter range. If you wish, however, you can give them more range with the snipers or with the Flash. The Flash is very much door-kicking territory, because you're going to be doing some incendiary damage, and they even have flashbangs to clear out infantry. Or at least stun them, so that they can then barge in. It's a very small squad though, it's only 4 guys. And that does mean that their staying power is quite limited. But then again, they are special forces, they're fast, they even have a laser designator on them. So if you can get them behind enemy lines, maybe the sniper rifle is the best loadout. If you want to have a bit more standoff-ish action, I'd say the 25 Punisher. And if you want to go door kicking, get the M202. As for their transport options, we have the Flyer GMV. You got the Little Bird, which you can equip with some sensors, but that is it. Or you got the Silent Hawk. The Silent Hawk is one that has a pretty decent stealth value, the higher the better. It, however, comes unequipped with weapons. You don't fire with this thing. It's a drop-off bird. It does that well. But it cannot shoot. I really do like that it has some ECM as well as countermeasures. I don't know if I've ever seen these things deployed in the matches that I've played, but then again, I guess that's their point. Next up, Pararescue. These are, I'd say a slightly different type of guys, depending on, of course, how you spec them. You can set them as the Pararescue team. Not a whole lot of rescuing to be done, because they're mostly going to kick down the door with those M1014s and the flashbangs. Special tactics teams are going to make them a lot more interesting, I'd say. Because you're going to have a recon team with stingers. So you can deploy these either behind enemy lines or as part of your front lines, and use their weaponry to keep the enemy at bay. And use stingers to either start sniping helicopters behind enemy lines, or use these guys a bit more frontal, have a sort of, a recon stinger team, if you will. Rangers, RRC, different types of loadouts again. They start out with the AT4. This can, however, be changed into a more standoffish loadout, in which case they get the Maws, and they get some slightly different weaponry. Transport options are the same. If you do need things eliminated at long range, or if you need snipers, you got the Ranger snipers for that. Again, 2 different loadouts. You got the suppressed and you got the anti-materiel. So if you want to start eliminating vehicles and potentially cause all sorts of annoyances behind enemy lines, these are going to be an interesting option to work with. However, I prefer the suppressed, and I typically turn their weapons off. The way that I use the Rangers is as sneaky behind the line units, which do not fight. They're just there to give me information. I want to know early when there is another wave of vehicles coming in, so that I can prepare a counter for it. I want to know what sort of aircraft the enemy's bringing in. I want to know what sort of, well, counter I need to be bringing in, and or where high-value targets are that can be eliminated by artillery. The other units, the ones that I did not mention, such as the cavalry scouts, as well as the vehicles over here, are already pretty much covered by the armored group. You've probably seen plenty of videos about that. Now, again, how you build this is pretty much up to you. I'm going to say I want to have the Rangers RRC with their close quarters. These are going to be the ones that I use as frontline recon. So I'm going to take those on foot. The Green Berets, I want to have these guys behind enemy lines. And maybe in an aggressive form. However, I'm not sure that does them justice, because with this, you can't really do a whole lot to vehicles. Yes, you got your M107. It does have some pen, but, well, not really. I'm going to take these instead. These are going to be my anti-infantry force. Let's just have them brought in by a flyer. Although, you attach this, of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're using that vehicle. As for the rest, I want to have my Rangers snipers suppressed. I want to have typically 2 to 4 of those, depending on the budgets. I am not going to attach a vehicle to them. And then for reconnaissance by force, I want to have at least 1 of these recon units, these recon tanks. These are very potent because they will allow you to do a forced reconnaissance with this thing plus additional armor. We have the MQ-9 Reaper. The Reaper is capable of throwing Hellfires at people, even JDAMs, and what I find very interesting is their Stinger loadout. This is going to potentially clear the way for enemy, or for your helicopters to fly in. It is a fairly big and very slow target though, the Reaper, so keep that in mind. For this type of loadout, I'm going to say I want to have something diverse. I'm going to go 4 Hellfires, 4 Stingers, and that should be it. You also got access to the RQ-170 Sentinel. Very stealthy reconnaissance bird. And you can see we got 125 stealth here and 175 stealth there. Higher stealth is better. It has no weapons, but it can scout. Visual range is not as good. You got 4.5 versus... Actually, sorry, versus 4.5. My bad. So visual range is the same. Pricing is a bit more expensive because you are paying for that stealth value. And you're paying for a bit more speed. I do want to have at least 1 of them, because it's a nice cheap unit that I can very quickly deploy to a certain site and have some eyes on targets. As for the rest of these points, let's get another sniper team, let's get another couple of Green Berets, and maybe another tank. I'm going to keep it as is for now. The cavalry scouts are also definitely an interesting option, because with that you get the Javelin, and of course we got the STT. Let's actually bring a couple of these. I don't care about your sensor package. I do care about your Stingers. So there we go. Alright, that's 1. What else? Infantry. This is where you're going to see more special forces. Delta Force. Large squad. 12 guys. They're also expensive. If you compare them to everybody else, they just really stick out with their 100 points. Are they worth it? Well, that's going to depend on how you use them. Again, you got options. You got standoff if you want to shoot from afar, and it also gives them an anti-tank option. The close quarter option does not give that. What type of infantry loadout you pick here, I would say depends also on what you did with the Green Berets. Because the Green Berets can definitely do sort of the same thing, albeit with less staying power. These guys are only 4 guys, but they're good recon. The Delta Force are not as good at spotting things, but they're very good at staying. So in door-to-door combat, you might want to prefer these guys over the 4-man squads. Transport options. We got the LMTV Warpig, which you can equip with a machine gun, all the way up to a TOW-2 Bunker Buster. Keep in mind that this thing is largely unarmored. You got 10 on every side, and that's not really going to keep you in the fight for very long. It can, interestingly, be thrown out of a helicopter, or well, out of a, a plane, helicopter might be a bit optimistic. And that does mean that you can get a platform on the ground very quickly. And, of course, use it to flank. We also have access to a grenade launcher and the Fletcher. The Fletcher is capable of going after almost anything. Helicopters, you got planes, you got ground vehicles, you got infantry. They can basically do everything, and they can be laser guided. So you have lots and lots of options. I don't think you'll really ever laser guide them with a range of 1300 meters. It's not like they'll really benefit from that. If you want something diverse, yeah, the Fletcher is your option. I prefer to have these as just cheap trucks. Drive in, drop off infantry, get out. So I'll take the Warpig, and I'll take 2 squads of Delta. Next up, and this is again going by Special Forces, we got access to Rangers and the Rangers with grenade launchers. These are just your Rangers with grenade launchers to suppress anything from slightly better range inside of a town. Your Rangers are a bit more of your frontline door kicker guys. Door to door, you got access to an anti-tank weapon, you got access to medium machine guns, you have a grenade launcher. They're versatile. They are very, very versatile. I'm going to say I want these on foot. Then we got the Ranger RAWS equipped with the same weapon. You can pick the Carl Gustaf M3 or the M4. The M3 versus M4, let's pin the difference. This is the come on. Can I pin that? Can I compare that? Not really. Oh well. The Carl Gustaf M4. I mean, it's the M4. It's just going to have more firepower. It is, however, a bit more expensive. I do prefer to spend slightly more on my infantry and just make sure that they do just a tiny bit more damage, because infantry tends to be a lot cheaper than a vehicle. And, of course, if you can cripple a vehicle or even completely move it out of the fight, then yes, please. So I want to have 2 of these as a medium range standoff unit. And, as a bonus, they can target helicopters too. Transport-wise, I'm going to say on foot. I already have Warpig. So with that, I can transport 2 of these squads in 1 truck. It is a high-value target at that point, but you can do it. We also get access to the Rangers with the Stingers. This is a group that carries 1 Stinger launcher with 4 Stinger missiles. Same range. You can, however, get it into a top attack Javelin missile, which gives them a completely different purpose and turns them into an AGGM team. That is something you don't really have access to otherwise. So in this case, if you want to have some better anti-tank range, I do suggest you go with these Ranger Javelins, because you can still get your Stingers from here, the Mech Rifleman AA. That way, you don't have to go without a standoffish anti-tank weapon. So in that case, I think it might be a slightly better option. At least have a bit more diversity in your toolkit, as opposed to having these guys also be Stingers and not have any medium to standoffish anti-tank range at all. Again, that's just me. Your opinion might vary. I'm going to say I want more Javelins. And, well, we got lots and lots of points left. What else could I be bringing that is going to be interesting to flank with? Or actually, maybe I don't need to flank. I got the Mech Engineers if I want to kick down doors, but that's Delta Force's job. I want to have a bit more line infantry. And I want to make sure that my Mech Riflemen are there, not so much for the Mech Riflemen themselves, although they're pretty decent. I want a Bradley. Because these things, especially with up armor and potentially better protection, and, well, depending on which Bradley you pick, you're going to get different options, of course. That autocannon, that Bushmaster, is very nice to have. I'm going to say I want a jammer on that to at least shrug off some missiles. And I'll take 2 Bradleys. This way, the Bradley, unfortunately, is not able to bring the Delta Force squads in, but, for example, it can bring the Rangers... it can bring the Ranger RAWS, and it can bring the Ranger Javelins. So if you got a higher threat situation, you can bring Bradleys in as battle taxis. As for that Silent Hawk, did I already get that? I did not. Okay, in that case, I'm going to get the Silent Hawk, just to make sure I have access to it. I don't necessarily will be transporting the Rangers in that, but at least I want to have the option to do that. I'm going to keep it at this level for now, and I'll probably revisit that later. Tanks, not that terribly impressive, because, well, these things you might have already seen. I'm going to say I want one massively up-armored M1A2 SEPV3 trophy. Potentially 2 of them, but that's going to go through almost half my budget. I don't really use these personally, but they can definitely land a big hit. I typically rely on anti-tank infantry, so this just, it isn't really for me. As for other tanks, let's go a couple of layers down. I'm going to say I want these with the Tusk, giving me a 270 point option. And then maybe one assault breacher, because that thing with the grenade launcher is definitely potent. It has no main gun, but grenade launchers and these Mikliks are able to get rid of infantry typically quite quickly. Let's make sure they survive. And again, we got some room there, but I'll fill that in later. Supports. Not a whole lot of new units, if any. I think these are almost all coming out of the armor deck. What I think would make for a good addition, next to being able to flank and do behind the line operations, is having some long range support. So in case of this thing, you got 5,000 meter range. Your rate of fire is not going to be great, but if you can snipe things, that's definitely going to be worth it. The Paladin has a bit less range at 4,300. And I find that at some of the maps, they're pretty big. The faster you can get this thing to fire, the more likely you are to get effect from it. So that's the Iron Thunder. If I want to have my infantry push somewhere, I might need to at least clear out the area or suppress enemy infantry, start wounding them. So to that end, and not to risk an aircraft, I would bring the M270A2. You can also bring the M270 with the high explosives, or even load it out with an ATACMS or a cluster, depending on what type of behind-the-lines operations you're planning on doing, or what type of threat you think needs dealing with. Keep in mind, you also want to have the transport capability here. You want to be able to get at least a couple of these things, because you don't have that many other options of bringing in supplies without relying on helicopters, which makes them fragile and can be dangerous. So keep that in mind as you're bringing in stuff. I typically go through these faster than I'd like, but, well, they will not really break the bank if I just add more of them. They're only 30 points. Anti-air, Patriot Pack. You can go with Patriot Pack 2. You can get the 4 missile launcher if you wish. You can get the up-armored version. It's going to depend on your anti-air preferences, but this is really the only anti-air missile system that you get. Yes, you can get the linebacker. You can get the linebacker with ShoreRad. That can also be considered a bit of a platform with missiles, but I'd say the Stingers are not really going to be in the same weight class as the Patriots. I'm going to go with 4 missiles. And even though I have a decent amount of air power, I do want to be able to shoot down enemy aircraft as quickly as possible. And with 4,000 meter range, you can definitely get some decent damage done. The ShoreRad, I think, is just too valuable not to use. So I typically run these with Hellfires and the ShoreRad itself. And with that, you're going to be able to target many different types of units using that autocannon, and the missile is going to be able to target tanks. Rely on armor quite a bit in order to take out enemy tanks, and of course there's helicopters options. But just having that on a pretty beefy platform, I think, is a worthy addition to this deck. If you wish, you can spend some more on it and thus make it even more survivable, especially with that 400mm frontal armor, or rather equivalent. Helicopters. And this is where it gets very interesting, because this is where we're going to see helicopters with stealth. How about the Comanche? Isn't she beautiful? This little workhorse can do a lot of different jobs. It is a stealthy helicopter. It's a pretty fast helicopter. It has decent optics, and you can load it out however you see fit. Want a sneaky anti-tank helicopter? You can do that. You can load her out with 6 Hellfires. Want something which can do a bit of everything? Stingers, Hellfires, or daggers, depending on what you want. The daggers are a bit more towards light vehicles. These are a bit more geared towards tanks. You can say, well, I just want to throw some Hydras at a building that I think has infantry in it. And then the outer pylons, let's say I want to have Hellfires. Seeing as this thing has good stealth, I'm going to throw a radar in to even further boost its visibility. It's not quite a reconnaissance helicopter, but it is pretty damn efficient. Next up, we got the SOAR, the Special Operations Helicopter. It seats 12. Isn't that nice? That works very well with the Delta Force. You can fly those in using a SOAR. Of course, yes. Oh, sorry, using an M60. You can also fly those in using the Osprey. You can transport 2 squads with that. The SOAR is, however, a bit more stealthy. And I'd say it is less likely to draw as much attention as an Osprey. Weapon-wise, you have some options which you might know from the other decks as well. I'm not so sure I really need a SOAR, because I already have some other options. I already have the Stealth Hawk, and with that I can pretty quickly deploy some infantry. The helicopter I do like is the DAP. Again, the DAP is very versatile. You got daggers, you got Hellfires, Hydra rockets, chain guns, and stingers. If you're going to do an opener, this can be an interesting option, because with it, you can very quickly eliminate enemy helicopters that are also doing a drop. If the enemy did manage to get out, you can at least hammer them with those chain guns. So, in this loadout, I think the helicopter is quite flexible. It can only seat 6, though. So, unfortunately, no Delta Force deployment. And that does limit you a bit, but maybe we can make some more units fit in this helicopter. We also got the bigger variant, the Chinook version of the SOAR. That is going to give you 32 seats. It also carries 12,500 points of supplies, so you can bring lots and lots and lots of things to the battlefield. Keep in mind though, you're putting a lot of your eggs in one basket. If you put 2 squads of Delta in here, for example, and you don't change the price here, you got 150, and then you got another 200 in there. So that is expensive. But if you can keep it safe, this thing is a very, very decent battle taxi. Weapon-wise, pretty much the same. It even comes with a pretty decent ECM system, which has a 25% ECM. So with that, you might be able to throw off some missiles. And seeing as it doesn't really make the helicopter that much more expensive, I think it's a worthy upgrade. We also get access to the Guardian. I think we already had that from the armored deck. Very flexible helicopter again. And I think, especially in tandem with special forces behind enemy lines, if you know that there's nothing out there, you can send in a Comanche, or you can send in one of these if you want to start very much hammering things for a longer time than the Comanche can. It, however, is half as stealthy as the Comanche, so please bear that in mind. These things are not particularly sneaky, but they are flexible. You get fire and forget missiles, for example. You can get either stingers or higher ECM, giving them 25% ECM, and they're just so flexible. You can give these things the capability of going after tanks, and these are top attack missiles, so you're effectively going to be negating most of the missile or most of the armor on a tank. This, however, gives it very little capacity, if any, against other platforms. And maybe that's fine for you. Maybe you're going, yeah, no, that's exactly what I need. I need a tank killer. I call the Guardian. Fine, works for you. I, for one, do prefer to have some Hydras, because that gives me the option to quickly eradicate enemy infantry. The outer pylons can be anti-tank, and I do want that ECM upgrade. Although the stingers are also nice to have. I mean, can we have it all? Please? It is expensive, though, at 300 points then. And we have the Killer Egg. The Killer Egg, the AH-6. Capable of loading out, again, with quite some flexible options. Their staying power is measured in seconds, though. You can shoot these things down with a hind in a couple seconds. And unless this thing has stingers of its own, it is simply not going to be around for a very long time. Not against a hind, anyway. But hey, if you are interested in, for example, using your helicopters with... for example, you're going to bring the Silent Hawk and drop off some forces early. The Silent Hawk isn't armed. it does not have any capacities to defend itself. So if you're going to rely on that for your opener, you might want to use the killer egg with the AA loadout. And with that, it becomes a very cheap option. You got 4 anti-air missiles, and most of the time, that's going to give you, well, at least a kill. And hey, if you can shoot down the enemy helicopters before they drop off infantry, then well, yes please. Let's see, we're at 1075. I'm going to bring another DAP, because I do like these things. However, at this point, I think I'm a bit doubling up. I forgot about the DAP. If I already have the killer egg, I also have the DAP. They're essentially doing the same thing. It's just that the DAP with those chain guns has a bit more versatility than these things, because these are just stingers and the Gauss, but they have no armor and no staying power. The DAP does have a bit more staying power, and it has 25% ECM as opposed to none. So I'm going to say I want to have another DAP, and I'll keep it at that. Air power. How about a gunship? The AC-130J Ghost Rider, also known as Spooky. Very flexible, mostly anti-tank focused aircraft. You got the Hellfire Blast Frag. This thing is capable of going after infantry as well as vehicles, and it's a top attack missile. So with that, you're again negating most enemy armor. I think it is a very potent aircraft, a very potent missile. The problem can be, can you keep it safe long enough? Can you actually get this thing to fly into where it needs to go? If you're able to suppress enemy air defenses, and if you've just cleared the skies of enemy fighters, then I think this is a good option. If not, well, this thing has no stealth. It does have very good visibility at 6,000. The problem is, you don't really do that well when you start getting shot at. It does have a fairly high amount of hit points, so yeah, that helps. I'd say it's situational at best. It's very situational. If you want to give it a slightly better, I'd say, standoff capability, then the Stormbreakers might be more for you rather than the Hellfires. Hellfires are 1900, these are 3000, and that gun that it has, where is it? Right there on the port wing, or rather the port side of the fuselage, as well as, of course, the front. That's the Bushmaster, and that is the 105. You can start hammering targets down there rather quickly. I have seen these things be brought in and just clean out enemy tank pushes, and that is very satisfying. The ramp also gives you an option to load an additional 10 Griffin missiles, which can be fired at some slightly greater range, and the fuselage guns. You're currently using the Ghost Rider. You can upgrade that to Spooky 2, which gives them more firepower. Again, it's all on the port side. You're getting another gun there. So you're going from a Bushmaster to a Equalizer, which is a 25mm. This is not. I'm not sure exactly what a Bushmaster 2 is firing. You're also going to be getting a Bofors. So again, targeting infantry, but hey, also targeting helicopters. How about that? Fly around the area, quickly eliminate a bunch of helicopters, go home. And while you're doing it, just murder a bunch of tanks while you're at it. Why don't you? So let's bring one of these. The B-2 Spirit can be an option if you want to very quickly, well, fill out the rest of your air wing, but you'll have no fighters, no other options whatsoever. This, however, is with the tactical nuclear weapon. You'll definitely make a lasting impact if you can get it there. Because this is an investment of 1,000 points. And yeah, some people might go, oh yeah, absolutely, I want the nukes. Yeah, go for it. I, for one, don't really like it because it is a low drag bomb as opposed to what the Russians get, which I think is a semi-cruise missile. So you're going to be risking the whole aircraft in order to get that nuke off. Again, situational. Alternatively, you got cruise missile loadout. 16 cruise missiles. If you want to go for a few more bombs, well, actually not a few more. These are 30,000 pound bombs. So it's not quite a nuke, but whoever gets hit by that will probably not be around to tell much about it. You can go with 16 LJDAMs. Don't like it, don't like the range. It might not be a terribly visible aircraft. I mean, its stealth is alright, but it's still a big bird. I prefer not to use my B2 in a role like that. Standoff weapons, if you want to have a bit more flexibility, a standard bombing run or a massive bombing run, as this thing then packs 80 Mark 82 500 pounds. I think it's an interesting option with this. You are, however, going to run out of space for your fighter pretty quick. So, in this case, I'm sorry, Spirit, but we're not doing that. The Nighthawk can also give you a couple of cruise missiles. You have the JASMs, you also got the JSOs, you have the same, well, mostly the same loadout, except everything is laser guided. So if you are able to get a special forces team behind enemy lines, laser target, yeah, this will definitely get there. This will do some damage. I don't really know why you specifically would want, for example, the 56, the 55, or the 54. It's 500, 1000, 2000. I typically want to keep my aircraft as safe as possible. And that means I'm going to take the JASM, because I can simply throw missiles from very far away and pop out before anybody knows I was even there. It is a stealthy aircraft, to be sure, but that remains true up until the point that it opens its mouth, so to speak. Once this thing opens its bomb bay doors, it simply becomes visible. In a multiplayer match, I would highly recommend never to forget paying your air tax, as I think it's called in the game, which means bring a fighter. If you don't bring a fighter at the opener, and the enemy does, you might find that you're going to get reduced pretty quick, because there's usually somebody who's going to try and fly in troops with a helicopter. If those things get taken out, or if your drop gets intercepted, or, well, any bad number of things can happen, get a fighter. You have options with the Raptor. You can use it as SAT fighter. You can also turn it into a bomber. Well, multi-role, I guess. It always carries the Sidewinder, and it carries a couple of AMRAAMs. So, you're going to be getting out for free. If you want to use it as a pure fighter, which I typically prefer, you're going to get 6 AMRAAMs and 2 Sidewinders. And this just makes it very clear for me, a Raptor is a killer of aircraft. It's a fighter, it's nothing more and nothing less than that. The F-35, if possible, load it out with a harm, because the one capability that I don't yet have in this deck is the ability to target radiators, aka radars. Once you have a couple of harms, you will be able to start doing suppression of enemy air defenses, and that means that your Nighthawk might be able to come in a little closer, your Raptor can do a bit more aggressive anti-air maneuvers, and your Spooky might be able to decimate whole columns. What capabilities are we going to be potentially improving, or what we need to fix? Well, we got about 500 points on infantry. Let's see if I can fix that, because I right now have essentially 6 frontline troops, which I think is okay. I got a decent amount of transport options, maybe another set of Bradleys. So in that case, I could go like this, and that's going to give me 4 Bradleys. And don't underestimate Bradleys. Especially with the armor upgrade, you can start getting, well, into trouble when you run into a Bradley. The tow missiles are potent, and I quite like them. They're not strictly frontline units. I'd say they're more second-line units backing up a tank to deal with enemy infantry. Or, if you're up to the job, engage a tank with a tow too. If you're in that role, they're great. If not, you might find that they don't do as well. Let's see, can I upgrade them all the way here? This will make them expensive, yes. Yeah, I think I can get away with that. That survivability is nice to have. Okay, what else? We are looking at about 300 points. I have not a whole lot of tanks for a tank deck. So let's get another one of these. You can go over this, so long as you don't massively go over it. You can go over by 10%. And that is going to work fine within your total score. Seeing as infantry and behind the lines infiltration is something that these guys do very well, I'm going to say I want to have another couple of points here, and that's 9,990 out of 10. So I'm going to say this is SF armor. And again, this is just my selection of units. there are definitely other feasible combinations, and it's going to be up to you to figure those out. The game is coming out in June, so you don't have to wait that much longer, although it might feel like a bit of a wait. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are on those special forces and on this deck. Maybe it's horrible. Maybe you really don't like it and you would never play with that, and that's fine. This is what I would play with, and we all have our preferences. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon for more Broken Arrow.